to the Positive Change Hour. I'm Dr. Stephanie Myers, and I'm the National Co-Chair of Black Women for Positive Change. I'm here today representing our organization, and our other co-chair is Virginia Delegate Dawn S. Hester, who's not able to be with us this afternoon. But I'm pleased that my co-host for our show today, our program today, is Karen Carrington, who is the National Co-Chair of Media Relations and Merchandising for our network, Black Women for Positive Change. We're a volunteer organization, so you will see in this program, we will be interviewing two women in fact, who are going to talk about domestic violence and their personal experiences. But before we get into the interviews, Karen Carrington is going to go over some statistics to really make the point about how serious domestic violence is. We want to thank our participants today. We want to thank Harborview Filmworks for providing services. We couldn't do this show without them, and we'd like to thank them very much. So Karen, please share with us, this whole problem of domestic violence is a really serious problem, isn't it?
It is an extremely serious problem. We'd like to provide you with some statistics and information regarding domestic violence. Violence of any kind is a serious public issue in the United States. From infants to elderly, it affects people in all stages of life. In 2010, over 16,250 people were victims of homicide, and over 38,000 took their own lives. The number of violent deaths tells only part of the story. 1 in 4 women, that's 22.3%, have been the victim of severe physical violence by an intimate partner, while 1 in 7 men, that's 14.0%, have experienced the same domestic violence. In fact, in 2011, President Obama designated February as Domestic Violence Month for Teens. This is a very important issue because 1 in 10 high school students are affected by domestic violence from a partner. So with this being Teen Domestic Violence Month, we want to ensure that people understand that abuse is never something that you have to take, and we have many resources for you to get help and get out of bad relationships. Please go to the CDC and look up different organizations across the country for assistance. Thank you.
Our first interview is going to be conducted by our chaplain for Black Women for Positive Change, Reverend Dr. Barbara Reynolds. We call her the Dean of Journalism for Black Women in America, and she is truly that. Today she will be interviewing one of our special guests, Barbara Marshall. And Barbara Marshall is the mother of 2 successful sons. One of her sons is Brandon Marshall, who's an outside linebacker with the National Football League on the team with the Denver Broncos.
I'm Reverend Dr. Barbara Reynolds. I'm chaplain for Black Women for Positive Change. And I'm talking today with Barbara Marshall, and we're discussing domestic violence. Barbara, domestic violence is such a painful issue to talk about. And we're so happy that you are going to share this with us. But can you just explain what happened in your life that you brought to this point where we would have to discuss this issue?
Well, back in 1999, I was abused by my now ex-husband. My children, I have 2 sons, and at that time they were 10 and 12 years old, and we had to hide from him. His behavior escalated. He became more aggressive and more violent. So I had to take my children and go stay at a relative's house to hide from him. We hid out for approximately 3 weeks. He found us, kicked in the door to the apartment where we were staying, and he proceeded to pin me into the bathroom, and a fight ensued. By the grace of God, I'm here today, and he subsequently ended up serving 3 years in prison.
Now, we're talking about battering.
Battering.
Physical abuse.
Physical abuse, yes, ma'am.
Did he hit you with anything, his fist
His
or
fist.
what?
It was his fist, yes.
Now, how did it start? I know it didn't start with the beating. I mean, was there a gradual escalation?
It was gradual. It was, a little bit of verbal here and there. He's a little bit older than me, 8 years. I was young when we got married. I was 21. And so it just gradually escalated to be more, his behavior became more and more aggressive. Mm-hmm. He did start using substances. And so that kind of amped up, his aggression. He was possessive, and he started isolating me at home. He didn't want me to work during the first part of our marriage. And that was one of the signs that, he had that domineering personality.
Well, in my own life, I've watched relatives in my own family be abused. And the question I ask them is, why did you stay? So I'm asking you the same question. Why did you stay?
The abuse wasn't totally ongoing. It was every now and again, depending on the circumstances. And I thought I could handle it. Sometimes it's a little bit of embarrassment. You don't want your family to know what you're going through. So you try to hide it. You try to shrug it off. And they're good at apologizing. And, I'm not going to do it again. So you trust and believe them. He went to an addiction house 3 different times. And I tried to be there because that was my husband, my kid's father, and I just didn't want to break up my family.
That's a story that we often hear.
Right.
That the family want to concentrate on the stability of the family.
Right.
But there are usually red flags, and aggression, jealousy, things like that. What were the red flags that you saw? You might dismiss them, but they were there when you look back on it.
Yeah, they're there. And you don't think about it. You just feel like he loves me ever so much. He was a jealous man. He didn't like me talking to any other man. That was one of the signs. I used to work at a daycare center, so I came in contact with parents, men, and if he saw me outside talking to someone, then he would get upset about that. He was domineering. He liked things a certain way. He was really, things had to be this way or else. That was another sign. And I just took it as, okay, that's his personality. That's who he is. And, I took him for better or for worse.
Mm-hmm. And as we go forward, what do you tell people who about the red flags that they should look at for? And not dismiss them because, just like you said, they were easy to overlook, until they got so hard that you had to confront them. What should people look for as a sign?
Every situation is different, but the one thing, you have to trust your gut. If you feel that something's not right, if you feel that this person is different, even different from when you first met, go with that feeling that, and just know if he hits you once, he's going to do it again. They'll apologize over and over. You'll get flowers and gifts and this and that, but they can, and anything can, throw them into a rage.
Was he from an abusive family? I mean, do you think that was in his family background?
Yes, he did tell me that he saw his father batter his mother, and so, that was a cycle from there.
You have 2 outstanding children. Brandon, who is number 54, I think,
yes,
on the Denver Broncos,
right,
and another son who's a songwriter. They saw this, I assume. Did you worry about how they would react? Would they continue what they saw in the home?
Well, that was my reason for leaving.
Okay.
It wasn't that they saw so much of the physical, but they heard. They would see sometimes if maybe he grabbed my arm or something, but they they heard a lot of aggression, a lot of verbal abuse. And I did not want them to feel that this is the way that men are to act, you know, with their wives, their mothers, their sisters, or anyone else. So that was mainly my reason for leaving. I didn't want them to grow up in that environment.
Because sometimes what someone sees in the home will make them do the opposite.
Correct.
I've seen people make a choice that if they see the violence, they will either be violent or say, I don't want to be anything like my father. So
Right.
you, that case,
Yes.
he did the opposite, because I also understand that he does work with victims of domestic violence and the homeless.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Brandon, he decided that he wanted to partner with the Rose Andom House in Denver and also the homeless shelters to help with clothing, coats, and things of that nature. You know, to help, because we lived in a shelter for 26 days, and so he wants to give back.
Oh, that is wonderful. And I suppose my last question is overcoming. How do you heal from that and move on so the scars do not follow you emotionally? You know, there's scars outside, but there's scars inside that you can become depressed. You can become grief-stricken. So how do you overcome and heal and become whole again?
It takes a long time. It takes a lot of prayer. Family, my family is very loving and supportive, and you have to forgive yourself. You know, you didn't put yourself in that situation on purpose. So you have to forgive yourself, forgive the abuser, and move on with your life. You can't carry that. Otherwise, you won't get any of the blessings that, you know, God has for you.
Barbara, thank you. Your words, your encouragement, your story will help the healing process for many who are watching from around the globe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next segment is going to also discuss red flags in domestic violence. And the young lady who will be conducting the interview is the National Co-Chair for Social Media for Black Women for Positive Change, and her name is Jessica Ann Mitchell. Jessica is a writer with the Huffington Post, the Business Insider, and LA Progressive. And Jessica is the founder of a blogging organization called Black Bloggers Connect that reached over 1 million people in 2013. Now today, Jessica will be interviewing a woman named Laura Morris. And Laura is a volunteer with the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, and also Moms Demand Action Against Violence. Laura is a person who has experienced domestic violence. She was in a situation where she actually got shot.
I'm Jessica Ann Mitchell, the social media co-chair of Black Women for Positive Change, and I'm here today speaking with Laura Morris of the Brady Campaign. Laura has been a Washington, D.C. resident since 2001, and she has dedicated her life to advocating for those who were affected by domestic violence and gun violence. So Laura, I just want to start off the conversation with, tell us more about your story and why you got involved in this work.
So I met my first husband, my abuser, when I was still in high school. I was a senior. He had just graduated, and I'd come from a rather dysfunctional family background and had very low self-esteem. And he was someone that paid a lot of attention to me. You know, jealousy at that point was attention, so that was all great. And over the course of a few months, we became, started going out, and at one point he had decided he wanted to get his own apartment. He was still living at home, and he asked me to move in with him, and I was getting ready to go away to college, and I said no, and he talked me into moving in with him and giving up college, which was the first mistake. And over the years it just escalated into, abusive language, no one ever loved you, you'll never be loved by anyone but me, and then it, a push here, a shove there, and then pretty soon it was fists and beatings, and then one day he pulled out a gun and terrorized me with that for a while, and then one night actually just shot me. And after that it was just a steady nightmare until one day I finally left. And the terrorizing with guns continued, which is part of why I became involved with Brady, because you're so pointless. You're so unprotected and vulnerable at the end of a gun, and it's the most terrifying feeling in the world that you're so helpless. So
in an earlier conversation with you, you were talking about how your family saw some signs that they actually tried to warn you. What were some of those signs that you might have missed that your family was trying to signal to you?
I think it starts out where you become slowly alienated from people. I mean, he didn't like me talking to anyone, even my family. He was accusatory of even my brother. And it's just that isolation after a while, and you're embarrassed and you're afraid, and you just gradually close off from people, and that makes you more of a victim at that point. I mean, you don't feel like you have any resources, and you're just stuck in that situation.
Throughout the abuse, a lot of times domestic violence, survivors of domestic violence mention different types of cycles. So were there like different ups or downs that you experienced, or cycles that contributed to maybe you staying or something like that?
Yeah, they're all, I mean, I've read a lot about this over the years, and they're all kind of the same. You know, it escalates into a terrible incident, and then there's lots of apologies, and I'll never do this again, and, you know, we have, you know, child to think of, you're being selfish by, you know, I'll try, and then things are fine for a while, and then it starts again. And I think after, you know, the third or fourth time, I thought, well, I really need to leave, but at that point, you're so scared to leave. You know, my biggest fear was I would leave him, and I'd be walking to my car after work, and he'd come up behind me and shoot me in the back of the head, and I would have no warning. So to me, staying with him and being able to try to talk to him or somehow try to salvage the situation was easier than having him come up behind me and shoot me in the head.
So what do you think are the main red flags that were there that perhaps you overlooked, or that you would warn other young women to look out for?
Someone that's controlling, that tries to cut you off from your friends, that says, well, I don't think you should be doing this, or I don't want you seeing this person, or you spend too much time there. Like I said, in the beginning, all that jealousy to me was, you know, someone paying attention to me, but it's not. It's a controlling situation. Someone that's a little too rough, you know, I noticed that, and I didn't see it till later, that even, you know, grabbing my arm or walking with me, it was always rough. It wasn't a gentle sort of nice touch. It was rough. But I think the controlling situation is probably the biggest red flag to notice in the beginning. And how it's not their fault, it's your fault. You drove me to this. You shouldn't have done this. Why do you make me do these things to you? I don't want to do this to you. Those are huge red flags. And when you're young, I mean, I was 17 when I started to date him, 18 when things really started to go south. You don't really have the life experience to deal with these things, and you're confused. You don't know what this stuff is, and sometimes even when your family talks to you, you think, oh, well, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what true love is. They don't know what we have. This is special. But I think just cutting you off from your friends is the beginning of a long cycle.
When did you know that you had to get out, and what were some of the resources that you used?
I had tried leaving a few times, and I always went back for various reasons. Mostly it was out of fear. But the last night, the cycle had been, you know, we'd start these big fights. I would wait until my husband, he was usually drunk or on drugs. That seemed to be the biggest trigger. And I would wait till he was distracted or passed out for a minute, and I'd run in my son's room and grab his coat, put his coat on him. He was, you know, 3, 4 at the time. I mean, this had been going on for a long time, but, and I would grab his blanket and his toys, and we'd get in the car, and we would drive around until I thought it was safe to go home, or I would go somewhere for the night. And one night I ran in to grab him, and he was standing there with his coat on, and he had his blanket. And I thought, I can't do this to him. So we left that night and we didn't go back.
Where did you go?
My family was very supportive, and he was kind of afraid of my family for one reason or another. I think he was embarrassed more than anything. So I stayed with family members for a while, and then he moved out of the house and I moved back in. And there were still some incidences after that. It didn't end there, but even after the divorce, but it did ultimately end.
Okay, so You mentioned that you had a son.
Mm-hmm.
What were the effects of viewing this on him?
Well, obviously, you wonder. I think every day he struggles with, I don't want to be like my father. I think kids that are in that sort of environment do, but he's very kind, he's very loving, but I know he remembers. We talked about it before, when I told him about this, we talked about it, and he remembers everything, and there's a lot of stuff I wish he didn't remember at all. No kid should have to see that.
Thank you so much, Laura, for spending the time to talk with us. I just wanted to see if you have any end notes on how people can heal, any strategies for healing that you use.
Don't block it away like I did for many years, because it just poisons the rest of your life. I think talking to friends about it, being open about it, not being embarrassed by it, it's not your fault. I think having a support group, my husband has been fantastic, my current husband, and my family all rallied around me, and I think that's the only way you can move forward, because otherwise it just poisons the rest of your life.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks.
So you mentioned being shot at by your husband and having this fear of being shot in the head. Can you expand on that and tell us what happened?
Sure. We had an argument, and we were sitting on the sofa, and he had a gun for protection, but he'd started shooting things up in the house, and so he pushed me on the sofa, sat down next to me, had the gun in his right hand, and pointed it at my stomach and said, gut shots are the worst. You'll really feel this. And I don't know what happened. I must have moved my hand up from my lap or something, and the next thing I knew, I heard the gunshot. And he dropped to the floor, and he was saying, "Oh my God, I killed her, I killed her." But I didn't feel any pain. So I was sitting on the sofa, and I just kept thinking, well, I must be dead, because I don't feel any pain, and if he'd shot me, I would certainly feel pain. And it just seemed like an eternity, and I kept waiting for if you're dead, something should happen. And then finally I must have moved, and he said, "Oh my God, I didn't kill you." And then I realized he had just grazed me on the shoulder. But after that, the realization that he could kill me with a gun, and I'm so helpless. And so I eventually got rid of that gun, but then he got a shotgun, and that was even more terrifying. And so he would terrorize me with that. I can't even remember how many times, but it was always, once he had it aimed at the back of my head, on my neck, and said, "I could blow your head off." Once he had it over my heart, and he said, "I'll blast your heart out of you." And once guns come into it, everything changes. Everything changes. You can get over a black eye or a broken nose, but if somebody shoots you in your heart, that's pretty much the end of it.
So that's what led to your work with the Brady campaign.
Yeah, like I said, there's nothing more powerless and terrifying than being on the other end of a gun. There's nothing you can do. It's to try to talk your way out of it. So that's, too many guns are in too many hands of people that shouldn't have a gun. Domestic abusers, stalkers, they shouldn't have guns.
Hi, I'm Karen Carrington with Black Women for Positive Change, and welcome to the Positive Change Minute, where we expose you to people, places, and things that present an awareness of positive change in our lives. One place, immeasurable hope. That is the goal and legacy of the Rose Andom Center, named in honor of successful businesswoman Rose Andom, a survivor of domestic violence, who contributed $1 million towards the center's development to create an environment that will not tolerate domestic violence, but in doing so will improve the lives of domestic violence victims by facilitating better access to services. Ms. Andom's creed says, "Living with abuse is difficult. Getting help should be simple." Scheduled to open in Denver summer 2015, the Rose Andom Center, which has the support of Denver Mayor Michael B. Hancock and District Attorney Mitch Morrissey, will be a state-of-the-art facility and is already recognized as a showcase model of best practices by combining the services of 15 community organizations and 7 government agencies under one roof
to address the needs of an estimated 3,000 individuals and families affected by domestic violence. Denver has a long and successful history coordinated intervention in responding to domestic violence. The Denver Broncos have partnered with the Rose Andom Center and is considered the first family justice center in Colorado. Providing additional support for the Rose Andom Center is Denver Broncos linebacker number 54, Brandon Marshall. Brandon, who along with his mother Barbara Marshall and brother Marcus, are survivors of domestic violence. In fact, Brandon's mother shared her experiences with domestic violence and its effect on the Marshall family in an earlier segment. Brandon has made numerous contributions in support of the Rose Andom Center and recently sponsored a coat and clothing drive. Black Women for Positive Change salutes Ms. Rose Andom for the positive change commitment in domestic violence. If you would like more information or to make a donation to the Rose Andom Center, please visit the website. That's info@andomcenter.org or call 720-913-9080.
Karen, thank you for that Positive Change Minute. It looks like Rose Andom has quite a vision for what she's doing in Denver.
You're right. She is just moving forward with her life and determined to leave a living legacy in Denver, and she's doing it in a big way.
That's wonderful. Weren't you impressed with Barbara Marshall and with Laura Morris?
It's just amazing. We never know what an individual has gone through or is going through, and to sit and listen to them emote about their experience with domestic violence is just very heartwarming, and to see them share those stories with us and our viewers, it's just amazing, and to give people information on how to avoid domestic violence by picking up on the red flags.
Absolutely, and we really hope that our viewers out here take a page from Barbara Marshall and Laura Morris and have the courage to sit down and talk with your daughters, with your sisters, your neighbors, your moms. This issue of domestic violence is very serious, and it affects the men too.
Yes, it does.
And we really need to say to the men, 1 out of 7 of you are experiencing domestic violence. We know that you're embarrassed and you don't want to talk about it, but Black Women for Positive Change, we're a group of volunteers, and our mission is to deal with the truth, to put it out there, to just talk about what's going on. Right, Karen?
Yes, and that's exactly what we're doing. And we certainly want to thank not just the women who are involved with Black Women for Positive Change, but the men who are involved that we love to call good brothers. So we thank you for your participation.
We absolutely do, and that includes Harbor View Filmworks, the director, Shaka Balamani, and this show was produced as a pro bono effort by everyone involved. Reverend Dr. Barbara Reynolds, our chaplain, Jessica Ann Mitchell, who did the interviewing, and everyone else who was part of the crew. So thank you. This is the Positive Change Hour, and we thank you for tuning in.
Jane Austen on the beat.
Young J, I'm just waiting for my high change. D-Day, 'cause soon it's gonna happen, no. I'm just waiting on my change. Talk to him, Jay.